Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Andrew Luftglass, and I want to welcome you to this RNN Masters of Sustainability webinar. RNN, the leading sustainability media and business platform, is excited to present this brand new monthly webinar series. On the third Wednesday of every month, RNN will present invigorating and thought-provoking educational opportunities to learn from leaders in sustainability from business, government, academia, and philanthropy, who are not only making an impact on the environment, but also leveraging sustainability for profitability. We hope you enjoyed this month's webinar featuring Michael Green, Executive Director of CABA, the Climate Action Business Association. Michael is a seasoned advocate for climate policy and environmental action. CABA is a membership-based organization in Boston that helps businesses take targeted action on climate change. They provide their member businesses with the resources and tools needed to work with their business on sustainability efforts, political advocacy, and building a community of shared values. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker, Mr. Michael.
All right. Hey, thank you so much for that, Andrew. And look at that, we are live. Wonderful. It's great to get to speak with the RNN community today and share more of what's going on with Climate Action Business Association. We're here in Boston, Massachusetts, as Andrew brought up, and I am the executive director. My background isn't in working with the private sector, actually. It's been a kind of a unique trip for me to get to this point. And over the coming next 30 minutes, 45 minutes or so, I hope to tell you a little bit more about what brought me to that point, some of the work that CABA is doing, and how we are leveraging our voices in a larger climate movement, and also answer some of your questions, talk to you a little bit more about what we're doing and how you might be able to learn from some of our peaks or pitfalls, and and start to engage businesses in your own community as well. So if any questions come up throughout my presentation, you'll see in your bottom left-hand corner, there's a little box where you can start to type a question in. So if you have any questions, I'll try and bring them, answer them all at the end. First question, yes, this is still Michael Green. I know my face in the opening didn't have a mustache. This one does. Sorry for any confusion that might have caused. Great. So a little bit about myself. I brought up that I wasn't initially set out to engage or be working with businesses. I actually am coming at this from a kind of unique background where growing up, I grew up in the Central Adirondack Mountains. As you'll see there on the slide, this is a group of ponds that's in the Moose River Plains in the Central Adirondacks, about 5 miles as the crow flies from my house. Took this picture from a little seaplane ride, actually in the fall. Beautiful colors up there that time of year. And so growing up in the Adirondacks, about 98% of my town is state forest. A majority of the jobs and industry in the town are directly related to outdoor industry or forestry. So to no surprise probably, growing up I wanted to be a forest ranger. I found myself hiking and working in the woods quite a bit, and I thought that's what I wanted to go on to do. So upon my entering Northeastern University here in Boston as an environmental studies and policy major, I took my first what we call co-ops, where it's a 6-month-long placement internship, and I headed off to work for the Forest Service. I thought, this is exactly what I am meant to do, wanted to do. I was a backcountry ranger in southern Utah, predominantly looking for lost cattle and invasive plant species in the Escalante River tributaries and Escalante River Basin. That covers an area from just east of Bryce Canyon into where it hits the Colorado River. So upon doing this work, I spent a lot of time living in a tent. I was in the backcountry for stretches of 6 to 10 days at a time. Uh, really a lot of alone time and a fair amount of time to read and reflect. And I started learning and reading a lot more about climate change, the threats and the opportunity to respond to it that we needed to take advantage of. And for me, this really hit home when I saw a chart that said the forests in my hometown in upstate New York would closer resemble that of Georgia, the state of Georgia, that is, by mid to late century. And that really hit a chord. My family is third generation of living in the area, coming over to be loggers from Germany at turn of the last century, and connection to the place is very strong for me. And that's, connection to a place is it's actually what drives me to do the work that I do. So upon being quite honestly freaked out, horrified by what climate change was going to be doing to my community and the challenges that it would face, I thought that living in a tent, being out in the backcountry just wasn't going to be enough. So I went on actually to drop out of school, and I started that fall working for the organization Greenpeace. As a Greenpeace field organizer, I helped orchestrate everything from local actions in the greater Boston area. I came back to Boston after Utah, as well as finding ways to plug in and work on some of their larger actions that were happening at the time. And all of a sudden took this kind of early career pivot into learning a lot about direct action activism, community organizing, and I went on to work for kind of the who's who of the larger environmental organizations, with the last organization about 4 years later that I worked for being Rainforest Action Network. It definitely is a different background because a lot of the targets, if you will, or the people that these organizations that I spend so much time with are focused on are usually large corporations, looking at their environmental practices and challenging and calling out not standing up to their own values. So it was interesting, but at the time I got a lot of pushback when I was working for these groups that you're a college dropout, you don't understand the science aspect of the debate. So I put myself back to Northeastern University, and in my studying at Northeastern, I ended up pursuing classes in atmospheric quality, climatology, glacial geomorphology, understanding all of the various earth sciences, and really taking that deeper dive, as well as doing some postgrad work at the University of Edinburgh. And I was eventually found myself working on communications and doing research in Geneva on climate science with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So here I had gone from a career activist background to being someone that was starting to get into a career science background. Again, people told me I didn't understand the science. And what I heard then was, you might understand the science, but you don't understand the economics. You don't understand the business. And what we currently face is there's this challenge, and I'm sure many of you have seen it, is for every article on climate change or on a new bold policy measure, there's two people quoted. There's the local environmental organization, and then there is the business group that just about any time they're brought into these debates, their talking point is taking action on climate change is bad for jobs, bad for the economy. And I knew that that wasn't the case. In my community organizing experience when I was back in Boston at the beginning of my journey, I knew that there was plenty of businesses that have the same values and the same passion as organizers and activists, but they're just coming at this from a different leverage point. So that led me actually to leaving Geneva, coming back to Boston, and in my work there, I started to work as essentially as a consultant for a handful of businesses And there was this opportunity where a business said, we want you to help us with our advocacy. We want you also to be involved and support us in our internal sustainability programs. So what I started to figure out was that there was a business model there. Let me go to my next slide here. Okay. Now, as I said earlier, engaging businesses in climate action it really comes back to that debate of us versus them, and usually us is this progressive, in case prominently millennial, green, forward-thinking movement against these almost seems like nefarious business and industry voices. Yet, how do we find businesses that share our values, that share our commitment to creating a transition to a just and stable society, and then how do we help them leverage those voices? So I went on to be one of the co-founders of the Climate Action Business Association. We started with just one business. I'm happy to report now that we're almost at 100. And in the 100 businesses that we work with, a handful are actually business associations in themselves. So we have access to hundreds of businesses across the Commonwealth, and we're actually really excited to start to do more support and work more closely in other states as well. So why do we engage the business community? Again, it comes back to that scale. If you think of it as, on one hand, the climate movement, and then on the other hand, the business voice constantly being balanced out by policymakers and by the public. How can we take that voice and say, wait, it's not just activists or the climate movement that feels this way, but there's also plenty of economists, business voices, community leaders that also support that point of view. I'll share a great tidbit on one place where I was actually in Oklahoma City. And while I was in Oklahoma City, I was at a bar talking with a group of millennials, and we saw a tornado shelter sign by the bathroom. And I thought, wow, that's fascinating. I would never think of needing a tornado shelter being from New England in a bar. That's just something we don't have there. And almost on cue, someone who I had met that evening looked at me and they said, it's really interesting that you didn't have that growing up. Here in Oklahoma City, we didn't have earthquakes growing up. And it's interesting that, scientists and the activist community tell us that these earthquakes are because of the oil and extraction industries that have taken hold really of our state. However, the industries tell us because we're on a fault line, and this is something that's natural and could be happening because of natural causes. And you have to imagine, I'm looking at the person just like, wait a second, you're actually debating in your head whether you listen to a movement and scientists or to industry. And that's a debate that's playing out on different shapes, sizes, and scales across the country and really globally. So how do we take business voice that is on our side and has that values alignment and leverage it so that way it is not an us versus them narrative? I'm going to go on to my next slide here. All right, so maybe touch on a little bit of what CABA does, and here's just a portion of our staff and our wonderful office dog who is currently sitting behind scenes here. Hopefully he won't. Hopefully the mailman doesn't come again and he won't disrupt us. But that's Joey. Now, the CABA program areas that we focus on are essentially threefold. We work with our member businesses on their internal sustainability. We help them on policy and advocacy. And then we bring them together as a community of shared values. So on the first space on sustainability, we're helping our businesses with renewable energy procurement. We're helping them understand their greenhouse gas footprint, where it comes from. We've developed the technical assistance packages and opportunities to help them bring that number down and find ways for everything from employee engagement, customer education, through to some of the more technical, harder challenges when you start to dig into your greenhouse gas footprint as a small business owner. what we find is as we're engaging businesses in their brick and mortar and building trust and relationship with them, they start to also then become interested in what are the public policies that I'm taking advantage of? What are the different state incentives that I can use to help grow my business? It naturally starts to lead them into wanting to know more about public policy. So in our work focusing on the political landscape and helping our businesses use their voice, we focus on all levels of governance. So we've sat on commissions and groups within our major cities here in New England. We've also dabbled quite a bit in state policy, and then we bring a group down to DC every year. I'll be going down in early May for a lobby day with other sustainable business partner organizations. And we actually also are fortunate enough to serve as observers to the UNFCCC process. So we bring a small cohort of businesses and leaders each year to the climate negotiations. We were in Paris, and then this year we will be traveling to Bonn, Germany, which is an interesting case. This year's host country is actually Fiji. However, Fiji does not have the capacity to hold the climate negotiations on their small island. So we're actually going to be hosted in Bonn, Germany this year. So we're looking forward to that. And if you check out our website, we usually keep updates on our various policy work, as well as some video blogs when we're traveling abroad. Now, the last part of our program area that I referenced is our community of shared values. We have a lot of different businesses that we get to work with, but as you've heard me mention, one of the things that really brings them together is this commitment to climate change and this overlap of values. So that being said, we like to bring them together, different CEOs, business leaders, to find opportunities to work together, find ways to create B2B opportunities, and also share best practices, upcoming events, and ways that they get to work together. It's really exciting for me because then when I would go to a member business for a site visit and they tell me how they had a different interaction or working with another one of our member businesses, all thanks to the community in which we've been able to develop. So it's a great opportunity for all size businesses really to plug in. We treat our program areas like a menu. You don't have to do all three. Certainly there's businesses that don't have a brick and mortar that are involved, or they're renters and don't have control of their brick and mortar, but they're more interested in our events age. Then there's also businesses that are just really interested in the public policy space, or some that because of corporate structures can't get involved in the public policy space, but we help them on internal sustainability. So it's very customizable and built for your participation. Now, first thing that comes to people's mind is, okay, well, I'm a small business owner. I'm, strapped for cash and access to capital and resources. How much is this going to cost? We actually don't have a membership fee. We're find that many times when we're talking with businesses about how we want to service them or be able to work with them, that's constantly lingering in the back of their head. What's this going to cost me? So we find that we just remove that from the equation, and we're able to get right down to work with the business. And then we find our funding through other means, predominantly foundation and fun little fundraiser opportunities. Right now, that fundraiser opportunity, staff would kill me if I didn't mention it, is a campaign that we're working on to raffle a Tesla. So we're raffling off a Tesla Model S and X. You can go to carbonraffle.org to learn more about that. So businesses are hungry for action. I have our Cheeto president there at the bottom. One of the things that we've seen, just as most groups have, an explosion of engagement and folks wanting to find ways to they're feeling lost, they need community, they're feeling like they can make a difference and they want to take action, and we're really there to try and serve as an outlet for our community. So it's not just the activist, the organizer community that is feeling that need, it's also business leaders. we're seeing a lot of business leaders that are saying, you know what, not only do we want to lead, it's something that we want to believe in and we want to separate ourselves from the current discourse down in DC, but they also know that it's an opportunity to engage their workforce as well as to engage customers. For businesses that are looking to engage that next wave of workforce, they know that they will have a better appearance to the future employees if they are values aligned. So we're seeing that more and more as a driving factor. Yeah, businesses are looking for something. If you're a small business that's looking to engage, we'll certainly are open doors to you. Our member businesses are all sorts of industries and sizes. We have everything from mid-sized regional financial institutions, law firms, health and fitness clubs, a lumber company, hotels and resorts, food and service industries, really a wide array. You can see some of them listed on our website, but definitely look out for us if you're looking for this kind of community as well. So one of the things that I talk in this PowerPoint, I'm hope to cover a few major themes, and one of those themes being, okay, you're looking to engage your local businesses. How can you go about doing such? One of the things that I talk to quite a bit with our staff and anyone who really comes through our doors, whether they're volunteers or interns, is to help them understand how to cater your message to your audience, and that, of course, being the audience being small business owners. So one of the things that I look back and I think about is, okay, go to a business and they give you your drink in a styrofoam cup. Why did that business think of putting it in a styrofoam cup? Now we see that styrofoam cup and we tend to think of, okay, this cup is going to be on the planet for the next 10,000 years. It is going to possibly get crumpled up and end up into a drain and go out to the ocean, add to the trash out in the Pacific or the Atlantic, these massive swaths of space that are polluted with small particulate matters. We quickly think of a fire, essentially. Now, because you're on this call, you're probably like me, and you have a tendency to hear about a fire and run towards the fire. You want to tell everyone, look, this is terrible. We need to do something. Hurry, let's go. However, you need to remember that that's not necessarily the same way that most people think, especially small business owners. We can't tell them that there's a fire and they need to run towards the fire. Because most people's intuition is to run the other direction. So how can we create messaging, create framing that will appeal to those business owners? Well, you have to understand why they made the business decision in the first place. So let's go back to the styrofoam cup. It's probably cheaper to use a styrofoam cup than a more sustainable alternative. And it's also probably, there's some implications around hot liquid and it being an insulator and safer for their customer. So if it's safety and it's also looking at cost, what are the alternatives that we can pitch to the business rather than telling them about the terrible things that styrofoam cup is going to do to the environment? Why don't we tell them about the cost benefits or the customer safety benefits of not using a styrofoam cup? You can talk about polluted and clean communities and what that means for community health. After all, a healthy community is healthy for businesses. Also around cost. What about instituting a program where you incentivize your customers to bringing in their own cup? Then you're not buying as many cups, you're saving costs, and there's also some great familiarity of getting to walk around with your own mug from the customer perspective. So finding ways that you can take your message and properly package it and frame it so that you engage your business, the business community, then becomes really important. Remember that you don't want to lead with a fire. You want to go to them with solutions and with opportunity and meet them in the middle. So hopefully that is an easy and fun, quick lesson for everyone to grab onto. Moving along here, again, so businesses leading with their values. Um, as businesses are more inclined to be community leaders, we need to understand the opportunity for them to do such. Again, this comes back to finding the positive framing and the right pitch for a business leader to take action. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with the triple bottom line. But just a quick shout out to that. Looking at people, profit, and planet, finding the intersectionality between the three. Some call that sustainability, but really what we're looking at is finding ways for businesses to communicate and find opportunities to be value aligned with their customer base as well as with their future employees. So one of the other pieces that we're working on and talking a lot with businesses about is when you start becoming sustainable. It's kind of the amazing part of sustainability is that it allows us to re-envision everything from operations, how things are manufactured, how they're designed, engineered, how we talk about them with the customer base, slightly all nuanced by this triple bottom line. So what it essentially means then to the business at the other end is new innovation for them. Finding new ways to be leaders, to manufacture cleaner, to do things more efficiently and optimizations. It creates opportunity for that business to also separate themselves from other marketplace competitors. If they're the business that is doing this the safest, the cleanest, with the least impact, those are all things that then can feed into their market strategy and are also saving them money and finding ways for them to then take that capital and reinvest it into future innovations and starting to build this innovational kind of cyclical pattern where you save money, you reinvest it, you save money, you reinvest it, and it starts to separate the community, the business out, as a community leader. And it's really based, again, on creativity, and then also finding new trends, new opportunities, being early buy-in. That's one of the great parts about dealing with the CABA business community that I've found is lack of fear and risk towards doing things that are, on their mindset, the right thing to do. So we have a health and fitness club. And the Health and Fitness Club, Longfellow Sports Club, has done an amazing job of instituting new sustainability programs. And one of those programs being actually trying to reduce the water usage at the facilities. So Health and Fitness Club, locker rooms with showers, pools that are on site there. You imagine they have a very large water footprint. And they've instituted waterless urinals. They're finding ways to cut back the chemical usage, which then cuts back to the amount of time water needs to be rotated in and out of their pools. All of these things are sustainability practices and values alignment. But what they're finding is the less water that they're using, it's also saving them money at the end of the day. So I like to use that example because it's not your typical energy efficiency, where we're all somewhat now understand that energy efficiency. There might be some front-end investment, but it pays off in 1 to 3 years, maybe a little bit longer for larger projects. But this is a great example where the payback was quick. It's definitely helped them grow their business, but the reason for making the business decisions was actually to be more sustainable and values aligned. So one of the greatest opportunities that we're looking at that directly ties businesses' sustainability opportunities to understanding the policy opportunities is putting a price on carbon. Now, circle back to my early discussion on being from the Adirondacks. Growing up in upstate New York, I can remember in the early 90s where there were ponds and lakes deep in the backcountry that we would come across that would be absolutely beautifully crystal clear. And unfortunately, they were so crystal clear and beautiful because of acid rain had killed everything and sterilized everything that could have been growing in it. And it was a real challenge that many watersheds in the area face. And it's directly related to the SOx and NOx emissions from manufacturing and extraction and production in the Midwest. Those emissions and particulate matters being picked up by trade winds and coming across upstate New York. And how did we stop that? We put a price essentially and put things in place to limit what's called the maximum achievable controlled technologies for manufacturing and production plants that limited those pollutants from going into the atmosphere. Carbon is the same thing, right? It is a pollutant that we are dumping through our tailpipes and through our smokestacks into the atmosphere without a cost. And when we look at carbon pricing policy and how it's been put in place, we can see some very interesting outcomes. First, that if the price is set right, it is very easy for a business to understand. So we're looking at predominantly flat fee and rebate schemes where the price is put in at a dollar amount, and then businesses see that dollar amount and they say, okay, I can make smart business decisions now knowing that this added fee is going to cost me at a multiple of X over the next few years, but I can have that in savings if I pivot my operations, find new efficiencies, streamline processes, and reduce my carbon footprint, thus also can avoid having to pay that fee over time. So the simplicity of it is clear for businesses compared to cap and trade schemes where they find themselves in a competitive market and quite frankly resource stricken. Not every business, especially when you get into the SME space, has the ability to have someone on full-time staff to figure out how do we participate in a cap and trade market. So we've been really interested in putting a price on carbon. That's something that we're working on here in Massachusetts, and we're also encouraging and working with other states as well through a network that we began managing very recently. And what it also means for the business owner is that if I'm trying to avoid this cost and I'm trying to increase my efficiencies, decrease my carbon footprint, they're coming up with new ways to do things. It goes back to that creativity and innovation. Inherently, small business owners are creative and looking for opportunity. So why not harness that strength, harness that asset, and push the businesses to come up with new opportunities, new ways to do things, all because they're trying to avoid essentially what is a market signal. So I included this slide just because I wanted to talk about it from two interesting standpoints. First, I know for people who may be watching this across the country, you don't have the same action and things happening that we do here in Massachusetts, where we're, don't mean to brag, but we're #1 in energy efficiency on a national level, and we're also up there with solar production. I believe we're in the top 10. So why is it that Massachusetts has been able to be so aggressive on these goals and mandates on emissions? Is because we're a net importer of fossil fuels. So that's the other thing. When we put a price on carbon, that also means less money because of less use will be leaving the state. So that's more money in our pockets and less money going into fossil fuel industry that might not even be based here, but abroad in Canada or overseas. So there's great reason for action on our end for that. Now, if your state is a fossil fuel export, it offers two opportunities. The first, really being able to diversify your state's energy as well as economic profile. We hear about the challenges happening in Appalachia and communities that were based on coal as coal winds down and continues to become more antiquated. Now we're also able to create new job opportunities through putting a price on carbon and teaching folks how to diversify their economic portfolio. It can be used to develop workforce programs, in many ways to invest in infrastructure development and start to help communities that are dependent on fossil fuel extraction to begin that transition. The Adirondacks are a great example where we were extremely dependent on logging in the past century, but upon the development of the state park, a lot of those logging towns ended up going out of business because what happened is they no longer had that chief economic export, and they didn't put enough attention and enough focus into how to diversify the economy, continue to create jobs, and continue for the community to stay relevant. It's actually something that we can learn on not to do more than something we might want to be replicating. Excuse me, just a. So, carbon pricing carries a hefty community cost, right? There's the health implications of having those added emissions, those added particulate matters. It's not just carbon coming out of those tailpipes and smokestacks. It's other things that are directly related to asthma rates, to different carcinogens that are in the atmosphere. We're actually commissioning a report that will be released by Harvard School of Public Health, that will be coming out in next month. And I encourage folks to keep their eye on CABA and our news wires and various newsletters, social medias, to see that report as it comes out, because we actually were able to do, we weren't working closely with Harvard School of Public Health, is to draw a direct connection between putting a price on carbon and the benefits, community health benefits. So I believe it's one of the first studies of that kind, and hope that folks can refer back to us for an opportunity to learn more about it. So developing your own strategy. So for businesses that are their own, that themselves want to get involved and find opportunities to get involved, we're going to get into a little bit of, how can we empower you? How can we work with you? What is it that you need in order to be a community leader and a leader on climate action? I know a lot of business leaders are looking at the People's Climate March, how to get plugged into that. Certainly one way to stand out and support. Hey, it is Earth Day, I believe, on Saturday. So how do you go about letting your audience, whether it's your employees or your customer base, know that you are a business that thinks that climate change is something that's causing threats and concerns for your future business continuity, and you want to see action on it? So first, finding in your business community, finding other business leaders to work with. It's important to know that as a business leader, you're looked at as a thought leader and as a community leader. It's whether it's the local moving company whose everyone's trucks they recognize, the local cafe that a lot of folks stop at to get coffee at each day. You have your own community around you as a business leader, but finding other businesses, whether it's your neighborhood or in your direct associations, that are also values aligned, it's really a strength in numbers, right? So making sure that you're able to work together, find ways, hey, on Saturday or on Friday, we're all going to have signs in our windows to encourage people to attend the People's Climate March or to attend the March for Science as those are happening. Or if it's, on the countertop, we're going to have a piece of paper for folks to sign up to learn more about a different sustainability or climate focused group in the neighborhood. Finding ways to engage your community, not just your customer base and your staffs, but also finding ways to engage with other businesses is really important to leverage each other's voice. And then I also wanted to touch briefly on larger businesses. You know, a lot of folks have looked at this and said, okay, you've got great experience working in the SME space, the small, medium enterprises. What about larger corporations? So working with larger corporations and specifically engaging them on things like carbon pricing, it's really important to identify who are your key leaders, what a price on carbon might mean for them, and also how is it going to push that business leader to want to be more engaged in future, whether it's conversations, panels, or opportunities to use their voice on climate change. It then becomes very, very important. So one of the things that that I encourage folks to do is we really want to work in kind of three tactic frameworks. The first being to gain awareness within that business. So on Earth Day and surrounding the next couple of weeks, we're going to be tabling at several larger corporate partners' Earth Day events in the greater Boston area. So making sure they're familiar with what's going on. Educating them, so following up, offering lunch and learns, following up, offering opportunities for them to come and get educated on what's happening, how they might get involved, and really what your issues are. Then the last being empowering them. Business leaders know that they're community leaders. They know that they have leverage points that can be used to influence the political discussion. Empowering them to do that really comes back to what's the community, what's the network you're able to build around them. Strengthen numbers, and there's also a level of comfort when they see their allies and other corporate leaders standing next to them. So we encourage folks to reach out to your larger locally based corporations, as well as the small businesses in your community, and find ways to work with them. It doesn't always have to be us versus them, right? Us versus the business voice that says taking action on climate change is bad for the economy, bad for jobs. That's not the case, and we don't need to continue to replicate a narrative that says that. So finding businesses that can help you reframe that and share the triumphs and the opportunities that they're taking advantage of is extremely important. So to wrap up, turning that into political advocacy, one of the things you want to be able to provide businesses, small or large, you're working with is what are the roadmap? What's the opportunities for them to continue to get engaged? What's the political cycle look like? Businesses are tired of signing on to letters. We continue to go to corporations and businesses and with letters of endorsement. Find ways that they can be more than just a letter signer. Find ways that they can truly show their values, whether it's an art display in their lobby or if it is showing up to speak with political leadership on the importance of an issue. You really need to find ways that work for that business, that they're comfortable with, but also goes beyond just continuing to sign a letter. So with that, I'm going to kind of scroll back up here to the top. Here's my email if people want to reach out to me. And I'll take the rest of our conversation here to answer any questions that might have come up.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Why don't we kick it off with the first question that we have, which is how much of an impact do you think local businesses can have in the climate change effort?
Yeah, no. So I think I touched a bit on this, but it's a tremendous impact that businesses have. You know, when I'll share a story in that I was sitting in meeting with a group of senators at our local state house here. And I introduced myself. I was in line with a handful of other environmental and business organizations. We're going through the acronym soup of who we are. And then right next to me was one of my member businesses who owns a local Thai food restaurant here in greater Boston area. They have a handful of locations. And the the senator went past me and he saw the next gentleman who introduced himself as being the owner of the restaurant, and the senator stopped. He said, "Oh my gosh, I was there the other night. I went with my wife. She absolutely loves the French infused cuisine and your spring rolls. Why are you here? What brought you to come to the State House today?" And they took a few minutes to talk about carbon pricing, the importance of the policy. But here it was, the senator had just gone through the room and talked to about 10 of us prior and didn't ask a single second question. But when he saw the business leader, he recognized the person as being a dedicated constituent. It completely changed the conversation. So I certainly think that we need to find ways to engage business leaders because they hold a leverage point, a communication point that we don't have without them.
Okay, next one I have is, what would you say is CABA's biggest success story when it comes to your mission? And is CABA more of a regional group, a national, international? Can somebody host a CABA event? This is a multi-part question.
Yeah. Yes, you can host a CABA event. We would love to come and help you do it. Use my email to reach out and let's make it happen. That's the simple answer there. What has been my favorite tactic and campaign that we've worked on is, again, another interesting story. Last year, let me think here, 2 years ago, I guess it was now, just about 2 years ago, I walked into the office on a February morning and I had about 4 inches of water in my first floor. And the office was essentially destroyed. I lost countless of important financial and other materials, electronics, furniture, and what had happened was a pipe had broken 2 floors above us, and it completely flooded us out. I realized at that point that if this is happening to us, what about other small business owners? Whether it's that snowstorm that closes you for 3 days, a nor'easter that floods your coastal property, or some other challenge that the business faces, what do you do in that boom moment? And we needed to create a program or find a program that we could be able to really help educate businesses what to do in those case scenarios. So working with the American Sustainable Business Council, we launched a program called Businesses Acting on Rising Seas, or BARS. And last summer, for our BARS campaign, we went door to door to 520 businesses in coastal Massachusetts that are in high risk zones to coastal flooding or extreme weather. We educated them on those threats, the opportunities, where they could find information to understand their risk level. And the program actually received quite a good reception. And I was lucky enough, blessed enough actually, for the Obama administration to catch wind of our program, and they had us down in Washington, D.C. last year, where we were actually given an award at the White House last summer, and it was really wonderful to be in what would be the last year of that administration and be recognized for our hard work on educating businesses and high-risk communities.
Okay, I've got a couple more for you. Let's see, which one do we want to answer here? How about, so what are some of the inherent challenges for you when it comes to working with so many different types of businesses and people who, maybe in their business community, one method will work better for them and it doesn't work so well in another business community and in their business?
Yeah, so sustainability isn't a one-size-fits-all hat, right? So I kind of touched upon our approach of using this as a menu. So really, it's working with some businesses on their brick and mortar and sustainability practices, others finding ways to work with them in their policy, and just frankly, some businesses like to come to our events. They don't want to be involved in policy. They don't necessarily have the brick and mortar, or they've already done everything that they think they can. So they just come to us for that community building aspect. So being flexible, finding ways to work for the business, is always very important. You have to remember that at the end of the day, the business owner is sitting there thinking, do I want to engage in a climate risk preparedness report? Or do I want to go figure out why the espresso machine is broken or why that certain employee continues to not show up for work on time? They're constantly distracted by other challenges and other things that are day to day to running their business. So you have to really take as much of the workload off of them. And that's something that we've strived to do to be really the workhorse for you as a business. So that way it makes the progress, it makes taking action that much simpler.
All right, why don't we get you out on this last one, unless we get any more coming in. But for now, let's say, what is the first step that you generally recommend? And I know this is tough because of the last question you just answered with different businesses, but what's the first step you generally recommend for a business looking to improve their sustainability efforts?
Yeah, so the first step you should do is go to cabaus.org and join CABA. And then what that means is the first step that you get to take is actually having a conversation one-on-one with me. We really believe in a genuine approach to working with our businesses. So I try and find the opportunity to sit down, whether it's for a cup of coffee or over a phone call, to learn more about your business, the challenges you're facing, what makes you want to take action. So, if you're looking to get more involved and find ways that you can separate yourself from your marketplace, if you're looking for opportunities to innovate, or sometimes just something as simple as how do I communicate to my employees the importance of recycling? Let's sit down and talk about that. Let's figure out what are the opportunities and the challenges. We know that you can't just do it on your own. And as our network has grown, we've definitely picked up some best practices and opportunities that hopefully we can share with you to make it that much easier for you.
Okay, I guess we'll close it out there. Michael, do you have any closing remarks?
Well, I just want to thank everyone for calling in and listening to the presentation. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Let me know what I can do to help you. And again, we're looking to expand outside of Massachusetts and across New England and quite frankly, across the country. Let's get the business sector up and rolling and really working with the climate movement because we can't do it without them. So let's do it together.
Terrific. Thank you, Michael. And thanks again, piggybacking on what Michael said, thank you to everybody who participated in today's RNN Masters of Sustainability webinar. Please do feel free to shoot Michael an email. You'll see the email right there, michael.green@cabaus.org. Go to cabaus.org for more information on Michael and CABA. And we do hope you join us for our next webinar. It's going to be on Wednesday, May 17th. It will feature Dallas Scott of Greener U leading a presentation on sustainability in higher education and what behavioral science can teach us about space, users, and habit change. For more information on the RNN Masters of Sustainability webinar series or on RNN, you can visit renewablenow.biz. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.